Hi, welcome to Talking Brains, a podcast about mental health, books, and what makes brains happy. I'm your host, Dr. Stephanie Sarkis. Welcome to another episode of Talking Brains. I'm your host, Dr. Stephanie Sarkis. Today I'll be talking to Dr. Esta Rapoport about preschoolers, ADHD, and parenting during a pandemic. Dr. Rapoport is experienced in working with children with ADHD and other similar special needs and their parents. She has a BA from NYU and an MA from Teachers College, Columbia University, and an EDD from Boston University. She's the author of 2 books, ADHD and Social Skills, a step-by-step guide for teachers and parents, and Positive Behavior, Social Skills and Self-Esteem, a parent's guide to preschool ADHD. Her website is socialskillstrainingservices.com. Welcome, Esta, to Talking Brains podcast. I appreciate you appearing today.
I'm thrilled. This should be fun.
Yes, and we're going to talk all about preschoolers with ADHD. So tell everyone what's the definition of a preschooler, just so we're all on the same page.
Okay, the preschooler is 4 and 5 years old up until the 6th birthday.
Okay, great. So that kind of
which
defines.
Actually, in the United States, in terms of the CDC just came out with in September, actually, a number, and there are 388,000 kids with ADHD between 2 and 5 years old.
Oh, and that just came out from the CDC?
Yes, in September 4th.
And can you repeat that number again? How many?
Okay, it's total in the United States, 6.1 million kids with ADHD, 388,000 between 2 and 5, 4 million between 6 and 11, 3 million between 12 and 17. And of course, we both know very well, twice as many boys.
Right. So that's still staying steady then, the twice as many boys. Okay. So yeah, because I remember way back in research, that was how it was showing up. What do you determine as the reason why more preschool boys are diagnosed than girls? What's your take on it?
I think that it's developmental and biological and neurological and all that. That's what I'm thinking. The other thing is this, Stephanie, if you look at behavior and you look at kids' behavior preschool, who really gives you a feeling like, that behavior is really, really active, perhaps overactive. Mm-hmm. So I think that girls are a different dimension. I think that boys show up more. There obviously are more boys than girls. The statistics show it. The research shows it. But in terms of the reason, I would think it's genes. Mm-hmm. Genetics, genes, biochemical, neurological.
So a whole bunch of things put together, sounds like. So all different factors. Okay.
Exactly.
And what are some of the main issues that preschoolers with ADHD are facing, particularly maybe they're going back to preschool or in kindergarten with during the pandemic? What are some things that they may be facing or experiencing more often than preschoolers without ADHD?
Well, it's interesting that you ask that because in terms of emotional health, I think these kids are all mixed up, because what is not all mixed up now? They don't have a routine. They're disconnected from friends and family. Events are canceled. Birthdays are canceled. My grandson's birthday was canceled last March, birthday party rather. They're left worried, they're left sad, they're left frustrated, and the symptoms generally worsen due to the inconsistencies in the routine. They have difficulty staying focused. Feelings they can't control. Some of the parents I've spoken to recently talk about their little kids as being worried.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Which is really sad.
Right. And I've seen some little guys are wondering how Santa is going to get to their house.
I'm not surprised.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because if there's a pandemic and we all have to stay quarantined, what's Santa going to do? So yeah, there's a lot of questions parents didn't necessarily anticipate.
Absolutely, with a mask on though.
Right. And I was kind of coming with the idea, maybe there's a vaccine on the North Pole. We just haven't gotten it yet.
Exactly. Could be. So, could be. But I'm not taking it till the FDA approves it. So.
Right. Exactly. Right. And what would you, go ahead.
No, Santa too, I'm sure.
Right. Yeah. Santa's a wise guy. He's probably going to figure out. Yeah.
Right.
Wait till the FDA approves it.
No question. No question.
So, and what would you say to parents that are kind of dealing with these questions they didn't expect or these feelings they didn't necessarily expect from their little ones. What would you say to them how to cope?
I think that the parents have a really hard job here. And before we continue, Stephanie, I just want to say, please, please, that whatever I'm saying about parents, I'm not blaming parents. I'm a parent and I understand every stress that they're going through. I've dealt with it over the years with many, many families. So I'm not saying that parents are to blame. However, who is trained to deal with these issues?
Mm-hmm.
None of us. So I think that what you've got to do with these kids now, you've got to validate their experiences. You've got to try to ask them open-ended questions. You've got to be truthful about the virus. You have to try to maintain their social networks, even though they're young. And even though the American Academy of Pediatrics really limits the screen time to 1 hour a day for these young kids, that obviously isn't happening. The most important thing is to try to maintain a routine.
Okay.
And I think when you're helping these kids to learn to adapt to online learning, you really have to create a real school type environment. Remember years ago, we used to play school? Little did we know.
Right.
Find a desk with no distractions.
Mm-hmm.
The issue that parents have very often is they say to me, well, I can't do that. I don't schedule my day. Well, you have to for the kids.
Mm-hmm.
And, in the morning, you need to map out the day's schedule, a specific assignment. You need to give a Post-it. And when they do it, color this in and color the elephant in and color the mule in and color the donkey in. Then when you're done, remove the Post-it.
Okay.
If they're distracted, you should shorten the work. They're young kids.
Right.
The amount of work that they do is not going to determine if they go to college or what college they go to at this point.
Well, that's a really good point, because it feels like there's a lot of pressure on parents for kids to do well, even in preschool.
Tremendous pressure on them. And I think, everybody's got to take a step back now, because look, I have one child, the parents are very upset. They said, he's not remembering his letters and numbers. He knew his letters and numbers. Well, he's been home. When has he really accessed those letters and numbers? And, I think your goal here is to have a happy child, a happy child.
Right.
That is it. And in order to facilitate that, I think it's not a bad idea. If you see they're distracted, as kids with ADHD very often are, shorten the work. I also would do some sort of exercise in the middle of the work. I would take them out for a walk. I'd put on music. I'd have them listen to music and take a walk. There's a wonderful man who's, I'm sure Sparks. I'm sorry, John Rady. John Rady.
Yes, right.
His book is Spark. Oh my gosh. John Rady, his book is Spark. And he talks about exercise and the impact on ADHD, on the symptoms of ADHD, and it really works.
It's really remarkable. Yeah.
I mean, I have a little boy who cannot sit down and do his work, and his mother has him on the stationary bike for 5 minutes. He gets off, he gets a little reward, he sits down, does his work. The other thing is, I think it's important to debrief these kids about what did you think was productive. Get them on board with you. Don't be the parent/teacher there who's dictating everything. Be positive, positive, positive. Debrief what was productive. What do they think that they could improve upon? And for goodness sakes, a lot of compassion. But positive. In the parent training that I do, this is the positive element of it is the most important thing, because these kids, Stephanie, have been told all their little lives, no, stop that. Don't do that. I don't want to see you doing that again. If you do that again, this is what's going to happen. You'll go to timeout. You have to be positive. And the parents, it is not their fault. This is a difficult assignment they were given where standard strategies don't work.
Right.
It is critical to eliminate critical, harsh parenting and child negativity because it increases socially inappropriate behavior. If you increase the positivity, you will see a huge impact in self-esteem. First of all, from them feeling better about themselves. Second of all, because they were able to accomplish whatever you're asking them to accomplish.
And what if a parent says, well, what exactly does that mean to be positive with my kid? Because what the parent's saying, well, and I've talked with parents that are saying, I'm at my wit's end myself. They're working from home and they got 3 kids online. And what would be a real accessible way for them to encourage positivity in their relationship with their preschooler?
Okay, for instance, if this is a specific example, so say they're coloring something and their sister's coloring something, and they go and they grab the paper. You don't say, hey, listen, that's not your paper. I gave you a paper. That's just, you say, you know what? I have a new paper really just for you. Here, let's go get it. No no's, no negativity.
Mm-hmm.
You can find, the saying, and I didn't make it up. We know this. Find something good in your child.
Mm-hmm.
There's always something good. Right. I was in a situation where I was actually observing a child in the parent's home, and the child was kicking the chair during dinner and wouldn't stop. The mother got so upset. She's yelling and screaming. And let me tell you, we've all done it. We've all done it. So I get it. I really do. And the child stopped for a second, then started again. What she should have done is say, Jonathan, I love the way your napkin is in your lap. Mm-hmm. Look at how nicely you put it there. And look at the neat way you're eating. You're holding your fork so nicely. Good for you. That's the way to switch it. Right. To switch the negativity to the positivity. And it's hard because I think what it requires on the parents' viewpoint, honestly, is a lot of self-talk. I'm a big believer in it. When you're watching your child kick his brother or sister over and over again, you have to say to yourself, okay, I'm going to handle this. I'm going to be calm. I'm not going to be negative. I'm not going to say no. Mm-hmm. I had a child I worked with for a full year through the city of New York a number of years ago, and he exhibited so many inappropriate behaviors that literally the kids couldn't stand having him around. The teacher couldn't stand having him around. This was in a classroom of 8 kids. Mm-hmm. So we switched everything for him to positivity. I was lucky. I was there for a year. And he ended up growing tremendously. First of all, by understanding what he was doing to annoy people. You have to say, I love the way you're doing this, but let me just tell you about this behavior that might annoy some people. And you talk to them honestly about it. And this kid was only 5 years old. Mm-hmm. And I sat with him outside the 8-person seating in the classroom. And I talked to him quietly and gave him positive reinforcement. By the end of the year, we were in the circle. He's in the circle. He started to talk. He looks at me. I transferred every bit of that positivity and every bit of skill that I was trying to teach him into eye contact. He looks at me. He says, fine.
Right.
Now, it doesn't mean that a minute later he won't exhibit inappropriate behavior, right. But at least we won that moment.
Right. And he knows that you are accepting him for him.
Exactly. Well, by the way, that is an amazing thing you just said. That is an awesome thing you just said. These kids have to be accepted for who they are. If they talk a little too much, if they're a little too quiet, the kids with inattentive ADHD, if they look out the window, if you say, Johnny, come on now, we got to get to school, and he's looking out the window or looking at his shoe, you have to really accept them for who they are and where they are at the moment. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of hyperactivity they grow out of, they'll always have a little, but they grow out of it eventually. But, it requires a lot of understanding on the parents' part. And I think by organizing the home routine, not saying no, you also have to selectively ignore some behaviors. Like I told that parent, and we tried it another day, that when he's kicking the chair, try with everything in your heart and soul to ignore it. Mm-hmm. And it will drop out. Now, it may come back a little bit for a little while, but it will drop out. Positive reinforcement, social skills training, which is hard to do with these kids because of the difficulty they have attending, but you can do social skills training through their siblings.
So explain that a little. That's interesting.
Well, the thing is that they can, with, of course, the siblings' permission, mm-hmm. they can watch a play date of their sibling. And then you can sit there with them and say, okay, did you see what happened when your brother took the Legos? What did he do with the other child? Did he take them all by himself? And then the little boy says, no, he shared them. See that? That's what you got to do. See how nicely they're playing now? So I think that observing through siblings. Now, if you have an older sibling, you can also do a role play if they agree. Mm-hmm. It's a fine line between pushing them.
Could you go ahead. Well, could you explain for parents a little bit more about a role play between elder sibling and younger sibling, what that would look like?
I think that your older sibling has to be willing mm-hmm. to play a part, to be an actor. Now, I have one kid who has a 9-year-old sibling. Child is 5, so the 9-year-old can obviously read. So I gave the 9-year-old a script. First of all, I went over it with the 9-year-old first. We acted it out. I acted it out. And what the task was, believe it or not, it wasn't a social interaction, but it was something simple like putting your pajamas on at night. Our parents have the hardest time getting these kids to put their pajamas on mm-hmm. because you say, okay, get your pajamas on, get your book, and comb your hair, brush your teeth, then come downstairs. Too many steps.
Right.
So what you do is you have the older child role play taking your, say you want to take your shirt off, put it in the hamper. Mm-hmm. Then you have the child, the sibling, take your shirt off, put it in the hamper. You go through the whole skill list with rewards, obviously incentives, which you have to build into the intervention. Now, in terms of social interaction, you could give an older sibling, a script if they can read, but I would teach them what to do first. I would be the younger child who doesn't want to share, who says, this is all mine. I hate sharing. Why do I have to share? And so the older child can serve as almost a conduit between the will of this child with ADHD not wanting to share and what has to be done in order to have a successful social interaction.
So it's a learning experience for everyone. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Yes, I work with these siblings first. Mm-hmm. And you know what? They can get an incentive too. They enjoy it. Right. They feel good about themselves because don't forget, sadly, a lot of our parents feel a lot of guilt about ignoring the typical child. Mm-hmm. So here you're asking him to help or her to help.
Right.
They feel great.
Yeah. Yep.
It's complicated, but I'll be happy to help anybody with it if they tweet me or write to me or email me or anything.
And I'll have all your contact information, including your Twitter address.
Great.
Because that's how we met, is through Twitter and our dogs, because we have the same breeds of dogs.
Right.
So Twitter brings everybody together. So
absolutely.
And what would you say to parents that say, you know what, I try ignoring it, but not only do they continue the behavior, they escalate it. So I'm thinking about kids that are doing Custer's Last Stand where they'll burn everything down to the ground. You empty their room out of stuff. So what would you recommend for parents that have a kid that tends to be a little more oppositional?
I think that you need to give that ignoring time. As I said, it's going to increase before it decreases, but they have to have patience. Honestly, talking about dogs, it's no different, not to compare dogs with kids, please forgive me. But if they're younger dogs, and they bark and bark and bark and bark, every time you pay attention to that bark, it encourages that negative attention. So you have to try to absolutely ignore that behavior. It's good if you have someone in the house who can step in for you so you can step outside and see for 2 minutes to see if the behavior diminishes. Now, if it does not, you can, if it's frustrating you so much and it's so difficult, you can set up a whole incentive schedule based on the child's interests. Now, a lot of people, a lot of parents I've talked to don't like that. I don't want to reward my child. I don't want, well, it works. Right. Now, the rewards can be either a physical reward, a high five, or it can be something based on the child's level of interest. For instance, some kids are into stickers. Some kids want to stay up and watch 5 more minutes of their program. Some kids want to bake with their parents. Some kids want to go and take a walk. Some kids want to just be left alone and play the Nintendo game for preschool kids. So there's something that, and you have to decide and determine with that child whether an hour is a good enough period of time, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 1 minute, the end of the week. When do they get these rewards? Now, the other thing is that you have to sort of change the rewards from time to time. Kids who are more hyperactive generally respond better to physical rewards like, hey, great job, high five. They do respond to incentives. You just can't overdo them with kids who are hyperactive.
Ah, okay. Because
and the other thing about kids
go ahead.
who are hyperactive is you've got to make it stimulating. It sounds paradoxical, doesn't it? But these kids need to be stimulated. They need to be stimulated into a hyper focus. And if you do things that are bright and exciting, they're going to respond to that. They really are. But I hope I answered the question.
Yeah, you did. You did.
Oh, good.
So it sounds like even with little ones that it's appropriate to ask them what they would like for a reward. Would you recommend?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I would always encourage parents to include the children in this discussion. Now, which brings me to another thing. Life will be much easier if there are rules in the house. A lot of parents listen to me and they say, oh my gosh, I can't do that. You do rules with the children. They know then we sit, and you don't use negatives. You don't say, we don't kick the table at dinner. You say, we sit quietly at dinner, all positive. And so when they know the rules that they've helped design,
right,
kind of hard to go against those rules.
Right, they have a buy-in. Yeah.
Exactly. And then, once you determine how long it's going to be before they receive that incentive, that's something to decide with them too. Look, there are kids who, I have a section in my book about sitting quietly in your seat at dinner, of course, because it's a common problem. And there are some kids who need a reward in 5 seconds.
Right.
Or 10 seconds. And there are some kids who can wait to the end of the meal or get symbols that they then turn in for a big box of fun things. Don't forget, this is a time when kids need to be engaged. And I think that, and by the way, you can involve the sibling in the rewards too. There have to be things that you want them to do that's something that's important for them also. But look, you've got to concentrate on the child with ADHD because that's the kink in the armor. That's the dynamic of the family is determined. I mean, I've seen parents one parent called me last week and she canceled apple picking because she was afraid that the one child who's 5 would run off or be upset, or so the other child who's 9 didn't get to go apple picking.
Right.
It was sad.
Yeah, and causes such resentment later on sometimes.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and we talked about earlier in a previous phone call, we talked about the parent training programs. Could you explain to people about parent training programs and how those work and how those can benefit parents?
Very important. Okay. The American Academy of Pediatrics determined that for kids under 6, that parent-based behavioral interventions are the first line of treatment for ADHD. And I'm going to repeat, parents are not the problem. I'm going to repeat what I said before for emphasis. They were given a difficult assignment. Their job with the parent training is to be positive, to build self-esteem, to organize the home routine, and very importantly, and this is one of the hardest things, to control their own behavior. Because all that negativity, and as I said to you before, Stephanie, we've all been there. We've all reprimanded our child or said something which we really feel terrible about later. But being positive is the key to helping these children to build positive self-esteem, which in my mind is what it's all about, because it builds a happy child and a happy family. Right. Then selectively ignore some behaviors. That's essential. Positive reinforcement is essential, and social skills training. Those things are the paramount parts of parent training. And when I talk about the parents' behavior, they have to examine their own behavior and change it from negative, critical to positive, supportive, and understanding. Because as I said before, socially inappropriate behavior may be caused by negativity. Now, the other thing is, you have to encourage parents as part of the parent training to respond and not react.
Respond and not react. Okay.
Exactly, because reacting is, as my professor for my doctorate often told me, it's like off the seat of their pants. They can't do that. You've got to teach, you got to think intentionally, okay, I know that Billy or Susan is going to sit at dinner, and I know that she or he is going to annoy their sibling. I just know it. So what am I going to do? What am I going to do when that happens? Not deal with it right then and there. Because if you have an intentional response, then you can respond in a positive way, which is going to be great for the child and great for the whole family. Parent training, the main issue is the positivity, because that leads to positive self-esteem. Obviously, I think a lot about this because it's one of the words in the title of my book. So I really feel like that's one of the problems. The other thing is, achieving things gives these kids positive self-esteem. And if you could help them achieve whatever it is they need to achieve, and these could be little things, feeding the dogs, it could be anything. It doesn't have to be anything big. They will feel better about themselves. But the parent training, the first thing is to organize your home routine. And if it's hard, now some parents have ADHD. It is a familial hereditary disorder. So it's hard for them. I have sections in my book about that, what to do when you have an issue with that. And I think what you've got to do is really work doubly hard. Think back when I was little and my mom asked me to put my pajamas on. Did I run around the room in circles? I did. Let me ask her what she did. Let me ask my family what they did with me. Right. To get me to behave more appropriately.
Or what do I wish they would have done?
So much to talk about. Oh my gosh, there's so much to talk about.
Yeah. I think that's a really important factor, is talk to your parents. What did they do?
Absolutely.
What do you think would have worked too? For you at that age? Yeah. And then get your own treatment for ADHD.
Parents, aunts, uncles, anybody, brother, sister, cousins, anybody who was around those kids. Because what happens with, I call them our kids because I consider them our kids, is they become very vulnerable. And when they did go to school, and this could happen on the internet as well, as we all know, not only are kids with ADHD bullied, but they bully.
Right. That's the part we don't usually talk about. Yeah.
Right. And one of the problems is, and you say to yourself, preschool? No. It was really interesting because one of the kids I was working with who was 5, the mom said to me, "Oh, she's bullied in kindergarten." I said, "What?" This was years ago, years and years ago. They get kicked, they get hit, they get tripped, then blocks get knocked down, they get ignored, they're not allowed to play. That's bullying. Now, usually, thank goodness, the bullying with this age child is pretty much once or twice. It's not consistent like with older kids usually. But if you've set up that positive conversation way back, and you've said, like when you started the online schooling, the remote learning, Stephanie, if you started that debriefing, what can we do better? What did we do really well this time? What could we change? Then you have a conversation open. So if the child is bullied, maybe the child will come to you and say, now, it's a tough topic to talk about. So I would set up a time for conversation. I would encourage him or her to discuss their feelings. I would not put too much emphasis on when the bullying happened. I would talk about what happened. And this age group is a tough age group to talk about this because they generally feel vulnerable and they feel like, well, mommy and daddy are not going to like me. If I hit somebody, they're not going to like me. They're going to be disappointed in me if somebody hit me. I mean, I mentioned before, I have a child. I talked to parents the other day. The child walks around worried. So what I do is there are several books that I recommend. One is written by Alexander, Lucy and the Bully, which I have listed in my book. One is by Best and Potter, Shrinking Violet. And the other one is by Henke's Chrysanthemum. I would read the book once so they understand the topic. Read it again so they talk about, and maybe you could talk about the bullying then and say, well, you see what happened to that guy in the book? Has anything happened to you like that? But the most important thing is to listen. Listen.
Without
which
judgment.
Is hard for some of us to do because they have a train of thought. And once they start, you want to just let them talk.
Right.
But bullying is and cyberbullying now with all the kids online and all the kids who have phones, and it's become tragic.
Right. Even more reason for parents to get their own ADHD treated and check in with themselves, see how their self-care is going.
Exactly. No question. I mean, I've dealt with some adults and they're shocked when they get a diagnosis, but they're relieved because they say, you know what? I was wondering what the issue was.
Right.
I couldn't remember things, which is a paramount symptom of ADHD.
Right.
Now, the definition of ADHD, of course, with kids implies that it states that in the Diagnosis Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, which we both know well, that this ADHD has got to occur in 2 settings.
Right.
But does it happen to the adult in 2 settings? I guarantee. So if you deal with the parents, it's going to help the kids.
Right. And consistency is key.
Oh my gosh. Absolutely. And that's not so easy to do. Listen,
no.
For all of us, especially in this, like Saturday Night Live used to say, wild and crazy world. I mean, it's unpredictable. It's inconsistent. We don't know if the schools are going to close or remain open.
Right.
The only thing they can do as parents, the only thing is be positive, be organized in their own home setting, be compassionate. And it is hard. It is hard because some parents, my daughter is a special ed teacher in New York City. She does a Zoom with her own classroom. She also goes in active teaching. She has a kindergartner who's also on Zoom, who only goes a few days a week. My other grandchildren, they go mornings or afternoons. My other son, who actually helped me with the Zoom, doesn't have children yet, but he loves hearing all these stories because it's something that's not to be believed about what's going on in this world now. And you just have to sort of, as an adult, breathe a sigh of relief, say, okay, I'm not going to get upset here. I am not. I may be upset, but I'm not going to show my children that I'm upset. And that's really hard.
Right.
But got to do it.
Right. So, and in closing, what's a word of advice you would give for parents that are really struggling right now with the pandemic and trying to parent and work from home? And what's kind of a nugget of wisdom you could give them to kind of carry with them?
I would say try to find, because the stress, the anxiety, and guilt of having these kids is a lot. The stress is associated with managing the child's behavior because it's so inconsistent. You see the attitudes of teachers, attitudes of family. You really have to try to maintain a turtle shell. You have to try not to let other people's reactions affect you as a parent. And hopefully you're on the same page with your significant other. You have to think intentionally and ahead of time about the socially inappropriate behavior exhibited. You have to have a plan of action. The plan of action, we always say the more prepared you are, the better you're going to parent. What I would do is, and this is hopefully a quick fix, is I would observe the child, make a list of socially inappropriate behavior over a 5-day period. Next to each behavior, I would put a well thought out response. And then, so the behavior comes up again, chances are it's going to come up again. You know what you're doing.
Right.
I would also emphasize designing the rules, because you're not having arguments from moment to moment if there are rules.
Right.
Associated, of course, with incentives, because you have to. I'm not against bribery. I'm really not.
Well, it's kind of like what Barkley says, you get paid to go to work.
Absolutely.
So what's the difference between that and giving your kid a reward?
Absolutely. Right. I see no difference. And if it's to increase your child's self-esteem in a world where everything is all mixed up now, if they feel that their household is calm and happy and positive, and you have to have a sense of humor too. I think it's important to have a sense of humor with these kids.
Absolutely.
If you see them, jumping on their brother, try not to reprimand. Just come on, guys, that isn't an even fight.
Right.
Let's do something else now. Let's go do this.
Right.
There are all kinds of incentives that you can work in. The other thing, just going back, is, and I talk about this in my book a lot, is really make sure that your children understand what it looks like when someone's angry, what it looks like when someone's sad.
Right.
This is where, because if they don't, and they walk up to two kids if they go to school, if they're lucky enough to go to school, and they see kids arguing, they may not know that that's an argument. I know that sounds absurd, but I've seen it.
Right.
And with digital photography, this is easy now. You can make all kinds of faces of yourself and go over it with your child. Say, okay, what did I look like here? Was I happy? Was I sad? Was I serious? Was I, what really was my mood?
Right. Because
you have to make sure, especially in the bullying situation, that, and the social interaction situation, that even with their siblings, by the way, especially with their siblings, so you want them, we all know about sibling rivalry. My kids still have sibling rivalry and they're much older. In fact, my younger son said to me last week, when are they ever going to get rid of this? Are they ever going to stop? And the answer is no.
No.
But they love each other, but it's just...
Right. It's just part of the... Right.
It's part of growing up, Even if you're older, it's like Peter Pan. You sort of never grow up.
Right. Right.
Which is fine, by the way.
Right.
I'm a big believer in that. I don't mind feeling like younger than I am. It's fine.
Right. So thank you so much for joining us on the podcast.
My pleasure. It was so much fun, Stephanie. Thank you so much for asking me.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I think you've helped a lot of people today. Thank you to Dr. Esta Rapoport. Her books are ADHD and Social Skills, a step-by-step guide for teachers and parents, and Positive Behavior, Social Skills, and Self-Esteem, a parent's guide to preschool ADHD. Her website is socialskillstrainingservices.com. Please subscribe to Talking Brains and give us a 5-star rating. It's appreciated. I'm your host, Dr. Stephanie Sarkis at stephaniesarkis.com. Have a great day.